Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hanan, Pranjal, it's a pleasure to have you and a warm welcome in the 66th session of AIMA's popular Leaderspeak program. Hanan, many thanks for agreeing to do this session and a very warm welcome to you and for waking up at an ungodly hour of 3 a.m. in the morning for talking to all of us. Really appreciate it and thank you so much for doing this for us. Pranjal, a very warm welcome to you as well. Thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this session. With your background, you're just the right person to dig deeper and get Hanan to speak to us. Cybersecurity has become a major leadership concern, and we look forward to benefiting from Hanan's deep expertise in this area. He's had decades of experience in protection of digital assets and infrastructure. As the guardian of Micron Technologies' intellectual property, data, and business security strategy, Hanan brings a critical expertise to Micron's memory and storage chip business. Micron's chips goes into critical devices such as mobile phones, consumer electronics, data centers, and communication equipment, and the security is vital for the users. We are excited to have Hanan with us, and we hope to learn more about better ways to protect our data and systems. Ladies and gentlemen, while digitalization has allowed us to do more with less effort, it has brought with it the risks of dangerous levels of information loss, theft, and manipulation. The more the commerce and communication shift to the digital realm, the more the hardware and software becomes a target of subversion and crime. Businesses are increasingly vulnerable to disruption and loss due to data failures and data crimes. Compared to the physical world, in the digital world, it is faster and cheaper to copy a company's intellectual assets and pilfer its confidential information. Data corruption due to system failure also remains a source of anxiety. Yet, somehow, there is a paucity of cybersecurity expertise in most of the companies. There is a need for scaling up cybersecurity education and training to a level commensurate with the adoption of digital technologies by businesses and households. Chip makers like Micron embed security features that check for any tampering with the hardware, booting system, encryption, credentials, etc., before allowing access to data storage. The intruders constantly look for vulnerabilities to gain access, and hardware makers continuously update and upgrade the systems. Typically, the companies that continue to use old computers, servers, and software are the easy targets for data theft and system manipulation. However, the greatest cyber vulnerability comes from user laziness or lack of training. Most of the cyber attacks on companies are routed through users who use unsafe websites and apps and click on fraudulent links to let malware into the company's systems. The recent explosion of GPT services has led to sharing of sensitive business information with such services to get tasks done. Indiscriminate sharing of corporate information to save cost and work has become a new threat to intellectual property and business data. Today, money itself is mostly data, and without adequate cybersecurity measures, companies and individuals can find themselves in serious trouble. We are privileged to have Hanan with us today, and we have an opportunity to learn about the current and future cybersecurity issues and ask him the ways to keep our businesses safe in the digital world. With these words, I request Pranjal to take over and conduct the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Rika, and great to meet you, Hanan. I hope we can all meet you in person one of these days. But I think the issue of cybersecurity, as you very well laid out, Rika, is critical. I think we've moved from institutions to individuals, from services to manufacturing, and nearly every aspect of our life, whether we are citizens, consumers, professionals, I think needs some level of awareness and, of course, protection. So I think it will be better if we listen to Hanan first and then get into a conversation and try to understand the best way ahead. One of the things which I would request him to share is, the future looks even more difficult in terms of the sophistication of cyber attacks. So how do people like us, as individuals, as professionals, how do we cope with it? But let's listen to you, Hanan, and then after that, we can have a good conversation. So over to you.
Thank you, Pranjal and Rika, and thank you for having me today. Um, I think the challenge that we touched on, the cyber challenge, the security challenge, something that I've been working around for as you said, Rika, and made me feel old for a few decades now. I first started when I was 14, and I started as a child hacker. Um, Testing the boundaries and playing with scripts and trying to see where can I get access to. Spent a few years in the Israeli Air Force doing counterintelligence, where I learned what's the right way of managing security. And it wasn't cyber at the time, it was just plain old security and understanding what is important and how do we manage what is important. I think cyber has changed over the last 5, 10 years, probably a little bit more than that. And we're a lot more focused and we're trying to be closer to the business. We're trying to better understand what is the business risk versus what is the security risk. I think the challenges that we're looking ahead, and we talked about that a little bit, and we touched on some of those in our previous discussion. The change is happening faster than ever. I think both of you touched on the risk of people clicking on the wrong things. We call that the human firewall. We call that providing people enough information so they know what's the right thing and the wrong thing to do. We've seen a lot of companies, I'm seeing companies on a daily basis, dozens of companies on a daily basis that are breached because of lack of hygiene, validating that their systems are patched. We're seeing companies that lose credentials. We're seeing companies losing millions of dollars because they fall for simple spam emails, simple vulnerabilities, things that can be avoided. And the business risk is such that cybersecurity needs to be in the mindset of every leader in the company. You can see my background. This is the mantra that we have in Micron. Security team provides the frameworks, provides the tools, but we need each and every one of the leaders in the company to carry on the need to have stronger security and the need to have strong security mindset. Anything from how do we build chips, how do we manufacture chips, how do we manage the supply chain, all the way to how do we respond to emails. Second thing that I do want to touch on really briefly, because I think it's something that's important to all of us in our personal life as well, is that we have to understand that adversaries, really bad people, are looking at our lives, our profiles, our families, and they're a target as well. If you're an executive in a company, your kids, their social life, what they're doing in their personal life is also a target. There are simple things that we'll touch on that can be done to reduce that risk, but you need to be mindful on if you get a call from one of your children saying that I need help, I need you to send me money, I need you to help me do this. It could be your team member, it could be your employee, it could be your CFO. You need to know what to do in that case, and you need to know what are the processes that need to follow. And last thing, and I think it's something that for some of you that might be doing business in China, for example, understanding the compliance risk, the legal risk that we're seeing around cybersecurity, and the changes that are happening across the world around that. Would it be the SEC in the US? Would it be people in China, PIPL in China, and other regulations? So just quickly setting up some of the items.
Thanks, Hanan. So, the question which I want to begin with is the sophistication of it. You say that you've been an ethical hacker and you've been looking at protection since you were a teenager, but I won't go so far back, not commenting on your vintage, but what I would like to say is that even 3 years ago, the kind of risks that we had were significantly different from what it is today. May I request you to just share what is the enormity of the problem and what level of sophistication are we witnessing today?
I think what we're seeing and the change that we're seeing is just the speed. It used to take weeks, if not months, for zero-day vulnerability. And zero-day vulnerability is a vulnerability that the security industry was not aware of. So something new that we've not seen in the past, a way to gain access into data, into systems. And it used to take weeks and months. So that gave us enough time to prepare. Once that was discovered, we had time to patch, we had time to mitigate the risk. We're seeing that time has been reducing significantly over the last few years. I think with AI, we're seeing that is becoming days, if not in some cases even hours. AI is giving our adversaries tools that we never had to deal with in the past. We're seeing that in different levels. So vulnerability is the worst aspect of it, but at the same time that we're seeing that social engineering, the ability for them to collect information on our team members is becoming much easier. We're seeing the same computing power that we're using in ChatGPT, right? We've seen Samsung, for example, come out in public and say, we've lost our latest node. One of their engineers uploaded their latest and most critical IP because he wanted to see what ChatGPT can do for him. Basically, once you upload something into ChatGPT, you lose it. ChatGPT would use that data to train their system, and others would have access to that same code. There's nothing anyone can do about that. We're also seeing that deep fakes are becoming an issue. Deep fake is the ability for someone to take this recording, for example, mimic my face, mimic my the way I speak, mimic my jokes, mimic my everything, and make that a bot that can be used against me or in other meetings. We've been seeing that in different aspects, even in interviews. We're seeing people that are very experienced using deep fakes to mimic someone else for them to get a job. We've been seeing a lot of extortion. We're seeing that CEOs and other executives are being extorted by mimicking their family members. And we're seeing that that's used in different other ways that we never had to deal with in the past. The speed of technology that we all love and we all use in our personal life, we have to remember that cybercrime alone, without even talking about nation states, and we can touch on that, but cybercrime alone is a $6 trillion, US dollar business on a yearly basis. And it has been growing significantly year over year. So no one's going to leave that much money on the table. We also are seeing that nation states are taking a significant, they're using the newer technology in different ways that we've not seen in the past. We're seeing countries that are using blockchain as means to get more money to the country. We're seeing countries that are using cryptocurrency as ways to get a little bit more money to their economy. Those are risks that we haven't had to face in the past. And looking ahead, I'm not very optimistic. Again, the benefits of AI are incredible and will change how we do anything and everything. But at the same time, those same risks put us and our companies at risk.
When you say you're not very optimistic, Hanan, that is not encouraging for us as well when an expert like you says that. But let's begin with the institution, the businesses, enterprises, and then let's go to nation states and then to individuals. So, companies earlier had to protect their premises, right? Everybody inside an office using computing devices offered by the office typically stayed in the office or were limited. And you could provide a security ring around the office area. But with the new structures of work from home or work from anywhere, and a constant movement of teams also means that the security cover has to be around all individual. Now, can you help us understand what are the solutions that companies can look at to protect themselves when the teams who may be doing a lot of critical work are spread across? You have to secure every device, every action in multiple locations, not just in maybe, typically a company may have 3 or 4 offices or maybe 10 offices. But if you have 1,000 employees and those 1,000 employees are in 50 different places or even more, the challenge is clearly different, because there is also the dependence on connectivity. You don't even know what kind of Wi-Fi routers they're using. It's not just about the device. The hacking could enter from nearly anywhere. So, what are the best ways and approaches that companies are taking in today's world to protect themselves?
I think with COVID, we've seen the same issue just become worse. Work from home has required us to make significant changes, but I agree with your comments. I agree with the change that we've been seeing. If we go back 15 years, 20 years, businesses used to be in one place, one city, one country. That's not the case anymore. We're all international. We all have people working everywhere. Work from home has required us to be even more flexible and more focused on how do we resolve the risk, how do we reduce the risk. That is something that we've been struggling with, because at the same time, I need to allow people to do their job, right? If I'm too restrictive, people will not have the ability to work. People are not going to have the ability to be productive. So how do we create an environment that at the same time allows us to be secure and productive? I think that's the challenge that myself and my peers have been facing in the last few years. Our expectation is that this concept of work from everywhere, work from anywhere, being global, or the localization movement that has been happening in the last couple of decades is going to continue. In cybersecurity, we've been reducing the amount of environments that we trust. There's used to be a concept of secure networks, right? I think you said it right. You have to be in the office to be able to work. Then we started doing VPN. We allowed people to work remotely, but you have to connect to our secure network to do VPN. We started providing some cloud services with Microsoft at the beginning, having access to email, having access to some of the other environments. Then we started reducing that access with two-factor authentication. We found that the two-factor authentication doesn't really work because of things like click fatigue. People, once they get hundreds of pop-ups for every action that they take, just tend to click on it, and adversaries use that to gain access into other networks. We went over to a different framework that it's called Trust But Verify, where the concept of we trust you, but we want to make sure it's really you. And then we decided that our current framework, and that's where we are right now, is zero trust. We don't trust anything. We are under the assumption that everything has been breached, everything has been compromised, and we constantly need to validate that that's the case. The challenge is that with the non-trust of our environment, we don't always understand. We, as leaders in businesses, CISOs, security organizations, we don't really understand what is really important for the business to survive. What is the one process that will take the business down to its knees? What is the one file that we might lose that we need to protect? Micron, at the end of the day, I know we're a chip manufacturer. We're the third largest chip manufacturer company in the world. We have dozens of fabs. We develop chips, we create chips, we manufacture the chips. At the end of the day, I'm an IP company. What's really important is my IP. The rest, not so much. How do we protect the IP? How do we understand, out of the hundreds of petabytes of data that we manage, what is really critical for the business, what is really important for the business? Once we understand that, we know what we need to protect. I think the challenge that we all have as leaders in the industry, and regardless what industry we have, is how do we understand what is the one thing that we have to protect? How do we get our security leaders, our IT leaders, our security support companies to really understand what is important? And if the answer that we're giving to ourselves is everything is important, so nothing is important. The Zero Trust framework, which I really like, is the newest version of security framework that we have. It's very adoptable. It's something that takes a lot of time to understand, but the value is that we can be more focused on what is important to us as a business to allow us to continue operating regardless of the risk. 100% of the companies that are on this call, unfortunately, will be breached. You have to come to agreement and to understand if you haven't been breached already, you will be breached in the future. My budget, the size of my team is significant. I have hundreds of people working in security, yet I will be breached. There is nothing I can do to protect myself to be at 0% risk. It's just undoable. So now we need to understand, how do we discover the breach faster? And that is what is important. And at the same time, how do I recover faster? How do I make sure that I focus on the right things to help me recover and go back to do what we need to do, manufacture and develop chips? It's important that you push your security teams to be mindful of the business risk, not so much on the IT risk, not so much on the security risk. What matters is not the shiny tool that the CISO wants. What matters is, how does the tool that you want to implement reduce the risk? And the focus needs to be on the business risk.
That's well said, Hanan. I think business risk is critical and not IT in the classic sense, because there is this other debate. I was at the automation fair in Boston, and it was interesting. There was a big debate on IT versus OT, right? The IT services and the operational technology protection. And one of the interesting things which came out was that in let's say services, you can detect a breach maybe within hours, but in manufacturing, sometimes in the operational technology, the breach can take maybe 200 days to be discovered. And that was quite a revelation for me, at least. Which brings me to the question that it is getting more difficult. Yes, you have to prioritize, as you said, and you also go with a zero trust approach. The question is that with technologies like deepfake coming in, how do you ensure that the teams that are supposed to be responsible for protection, they are also strengthened? They also have to be on their toes. How do you, I mean, can you just depend on human teams for security, or do you think you have to now deploy, if you have rogue algorithms trying to hack into, you need to have the good guy algorithms trying to fight those terrible software. So do you see technology fighting technology in the cyber war?
Yes, that's a simple answer. We have to. The reason is the complexity of our environment, the complexity of our tools, the complexity of what we're trying to do, and the speed that our adversaries are moving requires us to be able to move faster. A simple example would be the way that we used to monitor our network. We used to monitor the network by just looking at logs from time to time, just going to the firewall and monitoring the firewall. I think the sophistication that we're seeing over the last few years, and as you said, rightfully so, AI would just accelerate, is that everything just moves faster, and we cannot trust anything anymore. That means that we need to be able to correlate incidents that don't look like have anything to do with each other, and to better understand the correlation. And it's all about the discovery. It's all about the correlation and understanding and better understanding what might seem a non-issue on one system and correlate that with others. The need to get better intelligence, the need to better understand the fluidity of incidents and events and even systems that are in the company is getting much more complicated. Companies have to deal with millions of logs a second. Human cannot be able to get anything out of that. It's just too much. And it got to the point where the only way to win this daily battle is have the right technology. One of the challenges that Gartner is pointing out for CISOs is we don't always understand the risk, and we go out and buy the latest and shiniest device or software or tool to try to reduce the risk. CISOs are under a lot of pressure. One of the things that I think is really important is for us as CISOs and leaders in the company is understand how do we reduce the risk, but not put too many tools in the environment. That starts from our endpoints. That starts from our laptops, from our PCs, from whatever. We need to make sure that we're not reducing the productivity of our team members. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we can collect valuable information from the systems, from the environments, and come up with a strong way to discover any anomalies happening in the network. To your point, the only way to do that in any environment, it doesn't really matter if you're leading a company of 15 people or a company of 15,000 people or a company of 150,000 people, is having the right tools in place to allow you to be much more mindful of anomalies, much more than what we've seen in the past. The second part of the same concept is allowing those same systems to make mistakes. One of the things that we as CISOs were always terrified about is false positives. So we don't allow computers to make decisions and enforce any of the mitigating controls. For example, if I see a computer in the network and it's behaving in a way that's weird, there's some anomalies happening, there's some weirdness happening in that system, we usually monitor. We want to validate. We want someone to go out and talk to the system. We don't have time for that anymore. We need to have automatic enforcement. We need to be much more aggressive. And us as leaders, we need to be more open for our security teams making mistakes, because that's the only way they will be successful. What I tell my team members and when I mentor other CISOs, what I ask them to do is make as many mistakes as you can. Just don't make too many big mistakes at the same time, and don't make the same mistake twice. But we need to make sure that our networks have that flexibility to make mistakes. If we see a system that is acting in a way that we think might pose a risk to our larger network, the speed that a vulnerability or an exploit would run in the network is significantly faster than we've seen in the past. So we have to take immediate action. The only way to do that is allowing computers to talk to other computers and make decisions. And I think our security vendors are starting to move in that direction. Still going to take time. There's still a gap here. And that's a depressing gap that I have to deal with. And we have to understand the AI usage by adversaries is much better than cybersecurity firms. And we're assuming that it's going to take a little bit of a time until that gap is going to be closed.
Hanan, let us, we have quite a few number of people who are participating and listening. Let me try to scare everybody a little bit more. And I hope you will try to reduce the scare. We've been talking about businesses and enterprises, but my understanding today is that it's not just about that. If you're driving a car, which is basically these days a computer on wheels, it can be hacked. You can be driven off the road. Somebody can take control of the computer in your car. That is a serious life risk, more than a business risk. And increasingly, cars are becoming very sophisticated. So that's one huge risk for individuals. Second, we use a lot of health devices, not just the wearables, which can harm you by stealing your data. But then there are also devices embedded inside your body, which also are now digitally connected. So you also have the possibility increasingly of some of the products that you use, the devices that you use, cause you bodily harm. How serious is that threat today, Hanan?
I'll take your scare and double that. How about that? There's an AI tool that has been running for the last few months and cannot be stopped. What that AI tool is doing, it's looking for nuclear launch codes. And what the basis of operation that it has is to use them if he finds them. We're fortunate that we have another AI tool that's running and doing exactly the same thing, but it does notify nations if it finds anything. As far as we know, both tools have not been successful. But going back to what you said, the risk is real. We're seeing that anything from OT systems are used. It could be your home security system. It could be your phone. The biggest risk that you have for someone tapping into a meeting is not someone putting a listening device in your office anymore. It's you bringing your phone, your iPhone, your Android. You can't see my phone. I'm trying to be dramatic there. But that's the biggest risk. If you have a business meeting that's super, super, super confidential, you don't want anyone to know about it. You sweep the room, you go to a restaurant, you do something that if you have the phone next to you, someone could tap into it. And it's not that difficult. It's actually pretty easy. As I said, I used to do it when I was much younger. It's not that hard to do. But the concepts that we need to understand is how to reduce that risk. And one more thing that I do want people to understand is that there's no difference anymore between your personal life and your corporate life. Your Gmail account, your whatever personal account that you use, even your shopping experiences, even the things that you do in your personal life. What do you buy from Flipkart? What do you buy from Amazon? What do you buy from Audible, the books that you listen to? Your LinkedIn account, the people that you're connected to, your phone friends, everything is used to create a profile that would later on be used against you. There's no separation between personal and corporate anymore. We're also seeing that some of the risks are focused on companies that don't have the ability to spend that much money on cyber organizations. We're seeing that some of those organizations, and I would focus on healthcare probably, and then municipalities, cities, they have a lot of old OT, a lot of old systems, a lot of old medical systems, and those are really vulnerable for cyber attacks. At the same time, companies cannot replace them. There's no way to patch them. There's no way to secure them. So they're an easy target. Right now, what we're seeing is that most of the hackers and the hacking groups don't always attack the huge corporations. I have a lot of security. Amazon has a lot of security. Facebook has a lot of security. We're still targeted on an ongoing basis, but it's much easier to attack 50 smaller organizations that don't spend as much as we spend on security, and we don't have to ask them for $50 million. I can ask them for $50,000. I can ask them for $150,000. there's one more sad fact that we have to understand. Even if you pay the ransomware, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the key back to recover your company. Even if you pay the ransomware, it doesn't mean that they're gonna leave the network. 70+% of companies that were breached once will be breached again. And that's a number that I want to pause on for a second. So once your company has been breached, unless if you take the right measures, paying the ransomware doesn't mean that they're going to leave the network. We know that hacking groups share information, share access, sell access to companies, especially if you're a hospital, if you're a municipality, if you're an infrastructure company, you're an easy target. Your team members are targeted. Your systems are targeted. Your personal life is targeted. I think the risks of cars, automotive cars, doesn't matter if it's second or third generation, are starting to be more targeted than ever. There are different companies, large companies, Immobilai, Autotalk, and other companies that help our cars be smarter and talk to each other. We are seeing that still breaking into your smart car takes minutes. It's easier than ever, and the risk of cars losing control in the middle of the road is real. Municipalities losing control of their stoplights is real. Hospitals losing all control on their systems is real. We're seeing that nation states are using that as a weapon. We've seen that in the Ukraine-Russian war. We're seeing that in the conflict in Israel. We've seen that in other occasions where hospitals and municipalities are targeted. ISPs are targeted. So that's something that in our personal life, we have to be mindful of, but we also have to be mindful in our industries. What is the risk that can be taken there? One last example that I would give is the Colonial Pipeline. That was an attack against a specific infrastructure in the US that is transporting oil between Texas and other states in the US. Disabling that pipeline caused a significant increase in the supply chain risk of oil in the US and hiked the prices of oil across the globe, basically. So we have to understand that the risk to infrastructure is growing really quickly, and everything is on the table. If you look, and you can find a lot of those articles in Google, you would see that a lot of those hacking companies, it's a company for every purpose. So people are interviewed there, and they have an HR and an ethics group, and they decide together what type of companies they want to attack. They see hospitals as a fair target. They see hospitals as something that is okay to attack, even though they know that they're risking people, and people have died because of those attacks. So unfortunately, that's a risk that we all have to be mindful of and think about in our personal life and our corporate life.
Thank you, Hanan. I think you said it well, and importantly, that there is no difference between personal and official and professional life. That's a very important point for all of us to remember, that just because you're home doesn't mean your responsibility of being alert is over. There are many questions in the chat box, and I've received some directly too. So let me just raise some of the questions which have on themes which have not been addressed yet. And some are very, very, fundamental. But let me ask with reference to your company. Companies like yours, which are in chip design and manufacturing, what can they do to improve the hardware security in this situation? I mean, is that part of the solution?
Chip manufacturing is complicated. It's a complicated process because we do the software side of things, we do the hardware. depending on the company, and I'm very proud working in Micron, being the first semiconductor to open a fab in Gujarat. We're actually opening our two fabs, the first one early after the new year, and the second one later next year. So this requires us to be mindful of how do we develop software, how do we develop hardware, and also our supply chain. The few things that I think people should be mindful, especially in companies that use a lot of OT. Semiconductor is there, but that's also, and we talked about that, healthcare and other organizations is taking the zero trust approach and embracing that, and making the changes and not being afraid about questioning the framework. Putting enough security around your network is critical, and providing less access to the network is critical. Less access doesn't mean that we're restricting, but being mindful of what we try to protect. But I want to go back to something that I said really early in the discussion. We need to make sure that we support the security teams by helping them understand what's really important. What is the one thing that they need to protect? If we try to protect everything, we're not going to be able to protect anything. We need to be very careful understanding what is the highest risk that we need to protect and focus on that. I think the challenges are not going to reduce in the next months and years. So we need to continue in that effort. The second thing, again, a little bit more focused on semiconductor, is two things I would say. One is secure by design, product security. How do we make sure that the products that we develop and manufacture are secure? We want to make sure that we don't have a SolarWinds event where someone is able to hijack or inject, code into our code, and then once we send that to our customers, there's a vulnerability in it. And we also want to make sure that we don't have a situation where someone can add a chip to our systems. And how do we validate that the supply chain process is secure? And that's a huge challenge that many of my peers are still dealing with and will continue dealing with in the next few years.
So, the question now, Hanan, many questions which have come are about personal efforts. What kind of hardware security features should an individual look out for in their devices? How do you choose the right kind of app which are secure? How do you make sure that your appliances and wearables are more secure? I think these are the questions that when, as a consumer, as a citizen, as a professional, when I make choices about these devices, how do I select? Is there an approach or a suggestion you have on to make things more secure? Most of us are not tech savvy. We are users of devices which are complex devices, but we don't always get into the settings or the features. We look at the user features, we don't look at the device features. So is there a way of looking at the device features, the app features, which can help us identify what is more secure and what is less secure?
I'll use the same phrase that I use talking about spam. I think it applies for both. It's very simple. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. If an app that will solve everything and anything, if something that is promising you, I'll give you free whatever, if it doesn't come from a trusted vendor, don't use it. Unfortunately, I'll suggest to people to use Apple devices versus cheap devices that you buy for pennies that provide you similar capabilities. Usually, you have to pay for the technology in a different way. You pay by giving up your privacy and your data. That's unfortunately the case. I think on how do we protect ourselves, be mindful. You don't have to be tech savvy. If something looks too good, and a strong competition from a well-known vendor, again, phones is the easiest example, but it could be your home router, it could be a home camera system. All of those, they're examples of adversaries. Would it be a
But
hacking group?
to interrupt you, sorry, Hannah, is there, for example, again asking a very layperson question, consumer question, that are there ratings or rankings of security which I can check for different devices? Yes, of course. Don't buy cheap devices, and if something is completely free, then you're likely to be selling your data, because then you are the product, as they say.
Right.
If the product is free, then you are the product.
Yeah.
But is there a way, for example, when you buy a car, when you buy an electric appliance, you can see the energy rating. You can, for automobiles, there is a safety rating which is given. Similarly, is there an ecosystem which is developing security ratings for various types of devices, which can help a consumer decide what is relatively more secure than others?
I have good news and bad news. I think for some we do. We use companies like Gartner, or others, to get some of that rating, but that doesn't apply for your home electronics. For that kind of stuff, unfortunately, there isn't something that I know and trust. I do a lot of research before I put any electronics in my house, or in my company for that matter. But it takes time to do the research and to understand it. I
So
think
that's a great point. What do you look for when you research and you say, okay, this is better than others? What do you look for?
so usually what I would try to do is I research the company. I research um, their security practices, and I research if they had any breaches lately. There are sites that provide you really good information. Breaches have to be public. Breaches have to be disclosed to the market. There are regulations that we as companies have to follow. So I do some research to try to better understand that. There are different sites. Some of them are really bad and don't provide you really information. We've seen groups that use that as ways to push their tools. Um, but let's say that I want to download an app to my phone. What I would try to look at is I usually would look at who's the developer. How long have they been developing apps? I would check to see if they have apps both on Apple and the Google Store. I would check to see the rating of those apps. I would check to see the company. If this is a new game, a new tool, a new app, a new something that this is the first time or the third one, I would probably not install that and look for something else. There've been hundreds, if not thousands, of incidents where cheap apps, free apps, as you said, were actually a means for adversaries to get access into systems. We've seen that with um, Chinese cameras. We've seen that with free apps on whatever that actually were used to collect data from phones and even be listening devices. So I look on the history. It's very similar to when you go to Facebook Marketplace, right? If you see that the seller, this is the first time that he sold anything, and he's been on Facebook for 3 weeks, that's probably fake. That's probably someone trying to steal your money. I always love getting those texts on social media saying, I have a brand new Maserati to sell to you. It's going to be for $1,000 because I need to get out of the country. It's not different from the Nigerian prince. Send me $1,000 and I'll send you 5 million in return. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. That's
So
the
quickly,
basic
Anand,
rule.
we are running out of time. So I have 3 or 4 questions. I'll do quick questions and request you for quick, short answers so that we can take those as many as possible. One question is on cloud security. Is cloud supposed to be more secure? Are there many instances of cloud security breaches?
Yes, there have been a lot of cloud security breaches. There are cloud security breaches every day and any day. Cloud provides you the capability, doesn't protect you. You have to do protection on top of that. There's a
So what
difference
can be
between
done for a small and many small and mid-sized company representatives in this in the those who are participating today? And the question is that what can they do to protect themselves for cloud? A specific answer can be emailed later, but a general approach would help.
General approach, if you're doing a software as a service, make sure that you buy the right security services on top of that. If you're doing infrastructure as a service, you're going to have to spend money, same amount of money that you would spend on your on-prem services to protect your cloud services. Cloud is just someone else's computer. Don't forget that.
Exactly. Good point. For a mid-sized company, is a firewall protection, a network protection only a firewall? Is it adequate, or do you advise now more than that?
Significantly more security is needed. Firewall is just a gateway, but you have to understand that once people are in your network, firewall will not protect you. If someone gave their password, that will not protect you. If someone was able to click on the wrong link and install the wrong software, firewall will not protect you. Firewall in many cases is just the gateway to the network.
That's a good one. There is a question on online game. A lot of people are playing games online, and that also becomes a gateway for hacking or stealing data. How serious is that risk?
Same as any other app. If you download the game or whatever app, it doesn't really matter. The app itself is just the way to lure you into downloading the app. It is a risk. I would suggest that you go and look at the list of apps you have on your phones, and make sure that you remove anything that doesn't come from a trusted source.
Thanks. I think I'll summarize what you said about small companies is that, you will have to invest significantly more in cybersecurity. It is no longer it's not that you have to spend, 500 rupees for putting a secure lock on your gate outside. You probably have to have secure fencing all over, if I can use that analogy. And Hanan, I'm sure you will add to that. So I'm sure that you do not take cybersecurity lightly anymore. It is not just about occasional breach, and what Hanan said earlier, it's the business risk that you need to look at. One final question I want to take on future technologies and the risk, Hanan, is about quantum computing. Is that, again, you talked about deep fakes, you talked about a lot of generative AI risks which are coming up. Is quantum also going to be added to that list of threats? Of course, each of these things are terrific tools for development and for improvement and innovation, but they're also risks if they're used badly.
Yes, unfortunately, that's the case. Quantum computing, one of the biggest risks that we're dealing with quantum computing is it makes encryption redundant because it can test trillions of combinations in matter of days. So the whole concept of encrypting our data, encrypting our keys, security keys, is becoming redundant. There are ways to protect against that, but it's still early in the process. The combination of AI and the next levels of AI, and if you have time, read about Q-Star project from OpenAI, and the reason that everything happened over the last few weeks in OpenAI with the CEO looks to be around that. Very interesting, very concerning events happening right now across the industry.
Yes, I think the Project Q Star is something still yet to be revealed. But I'm going to end here, Hanan, and thank you. But before that, for all of those of you who had very specific questions, please send them to the AIMA team, and I'm sure they will be able to get answers from Hanan on an email and send it to you. So Hanan, thanks so much. I know we can discuss this for another couple of hours because cybersecurity is so critical. It's like talking about personal security, right? There is just not enough care that you can take for keeping yourself safe. But thank you. It's been quite a learning journey for me also to us today.
Thank you, sir.
Many thanks, Hanan, especially for waking up so early for all of us. I think you'll see from the comments on the chat box that it's been an excellent session. And as Pranjal said, I think there's lots to learn. I keep telling myself I need to be more careful when I attend such sessions, but I think we all really need to get down to it. But thank you for throwing light on this very interesting topic. And many thanks for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. With this, we end the session. Thank you. Thanks, Hanan. I hope to see you in